Alright, today is brew day and I'm going to brew up a batch of beer. This is only my fourth batch of beer I'm brewing up, so I still stumble and bumble my way through it, but I think I've come up with a process that works for me and I just wanted to share it. I have all of my equipment and my recipe laid out here on the table. I buy all of my ingredients from Central Street Farmhouse in Bangor, Maine. The particular recipe that I'm following today, Central Street Farmhouse, is named the Hoppy Friar American Alt Beer. The description is, an American twist on an old German ale. We put the spicy and piney hops to this alt beer to create a one-of-a-kind brew. So let's see, it's got American hops in it, in a German beer, and it has about a 5.5% alcohol content when it's done. And this is the recipe that I need to follow. It tells me when to add the malt extract and when to add the hops during the boiling period, which will be 60 minutes. So what I've laid out here on the my table are the steeping grains and the muslin sock that the steeping grains will go into. I then also have the different hops that will be added during different times during the boiling process. And I like to lay them out, so I grab the first one at a specific time, then the next one, and on until I'm done. I have some Irish moss here and also the yeast, and here are the two containers of liquid malt extract. I've gone ahead and I've mixed up some Star San sanitizer to make sure everything is nice and clean. So I have my wort chiller right here in this bucket of sanitizer just sitting there, and I have a small dish container of Star San in it too. And what I'm going to do is make sure that the lid is sanitized, but I'm going to also add some of the other pieces of equipment that I need to use during the process. During the brewing process, I need a thermometer, and I like to just clip that on here. See if I can do it one-handed. And I use this hard rubber spatula for scooping out the malt extract from the malt containers. That's pretty sticky stuff, kind of like molasses, even stiffer than molasses. So I'm going to drop that in there. I have an airlock that I'll be using and explaining later, and I take that apart, put that in the Star San. I have a hydrometer as well to measure the specific gravity or starting gravity of the beer wort. So I'm going to drop that in there. I have a pair of scissors that I want to sanitize because I'll be cutting open the package of yeast later, and I want to make sure it doesn't get contaminated. I'll just drop those in there. And I also have here my timer that I can keep track of the brew times and when I need to add the hops. I have a bowl here that I'll pour the steeping grains into the muslin sock in, so I don't get a lot of the debris all over the table, and it keeps things pretty clean. I have a rubber spatula hanging here that I can grab at any time, and I can also squirt it down with some Star San sanitizer that I mixed up in this little spray bottle, so I can just give that a quick spray. I also have this strainer that I'll pull the steeping grains out with. Finally, I have a fermentation bucket that I have cleaned and sanitized, and it's just sitting there upside down to keep any kind of foreign matter out of it until I'm ready to pour the beer wort in it. Alright, the recipe calls for about 2.5 gallons of water in my brewing bucket, and I need to bring that up to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Shut off the burner and steep the grains for about 20 minutes. So I'm going to turn on the burner. Now while the water is boiling away, or not boiling, but actually coming up to 150 degrees, because the liquid malt extract is so thick, thicker than molasses, what I like to do is prep the containers for ease of use a little bit later. And I'm going to show you how I do that. I'll unscrew the lids, and then I'll, this foil is pretty difficult to pull off, so I actually just cut around it. I'm doing this one-handed again. I'll just cut around it to open it up. I had to put the camera down to do this, but I've got both containers opened up, and I'll get rid of this foil seal. Because the liquid malt extract is so, I guess it's not very viscous, it's thicker than molasses. What I like to do is put it next to the propane heater so that the heat from the burner will start to warm up the liquid malt extract, and it'll flow a lot easier. Now I need to check the temperature of the water that's boiling here. I don't want it to go over 150 degrees, and right now we're at about 130. Now what I've done here is I've taken the muslin sock and I've opened it up and stretched it across this stainless bowl, and I'll open up the steeping grains that have been already crushed by Central Street Farmhouse, pour them into the muslin sock. Oh boy, they smell good too. Wow. Wow. And then I can pull this up, tie that in a knot, and that's ready for steeping. Alright, I'm going to check on the temperature here of the brewing water, and at 150 degrees I need to shut things off, which I've already done. I kind of guessed at what the temp was, and that's pretty gosh darn close to 150 degrees right there. I'm going to put the steeping grains in now. And here go the steeping grains, and I'm just going to drift them around a little bit, drag them through. And then I'm going to put the lid on. And that's going to stay for 20 minutes, so I'm going to start my timer. So I've started my timer, and I've got to wait for 20 minutes to show up here. So now I can go do something else. Okay, 20 minutes has gone by for the steeping process to be complete, and you can take a look down inside there and see the grains in the muslin sock. Just give it out a little bit of a sweep, and now I'll drain those steeping grains. You don't want to squeeze the liquid out of them. Just going to let them sit there and drain naturally. Alright, once the grains have drained, I'm going to set them outside here underneath the keel of my boat. The next step is to light the burner and bring the beer wort up to boiling temperature so I can add the malt and the bittering hops. Now I'll turn on the propane burner. I can tell you that already there is that wonderful earthy organic smell coming from the beer as it starts to warm up, and it's one of those nice benefits of doing this. It's just a great experience. When I'm boiling up beer, I don't like to have the flame on really high for fear of burning the malt extract or any of the grains in there. So I just have it going as you would be maybe preparing something on your kitchen stove, whether electric or gas. So just I like to keep the throttle, so to speak, on the propane just at the right sound and flame height, not to burn anything. All right, it's time to check on the temperature here, see how things are going. And I'm getting close. It's almost up to 200. And at 212, I'll actually shut the burner off before I add the malt extract. Okay, the beer wort is now boiling, so I'm going to shut the burner off. And I'm going to add 1 container of liquid malt extract. You can see just how thick that is. And with the liquid extract added to the wort here, I want to mix it up, make sure none of it is burning on the bottom of the brew kettle. All right, with the extract mixed in and stirred up, I've started the burner again, and I'm going to add my first package of hops to the wort, and these are nugget hops. And after adding the hops, I'll start my timer for 60 minutes here. That's what I'm waiting for. All right, once I have a good boil established here, I will then adjust the propane burner down. I don't really need it on all that high. All right, during the last 20 minutes of the boil, I'm supposed to add some sterling hops, which I've done, and I'll give them a little bit of a mix up here. During the last 15 minutes of the boil, I'm adding some Irish moss, and what that does is it helps settle all of the material that's floating around there. It helps it drop out of the wort and settle to the bottom during the fermentation process later on. Okay, the timer says I'm 50 minutes into my boiling time. That means I have 10 more minutes left, and the recipe calls for a package of sterling hops to be poured into the wort for 10 minutes. All right, now I'm into the last minute of the boil, and I'm adding some Chinook hops. Okay, at 60 minutes, I'm going to shut off the burner and put in my next container of liquid malt extract. This is known as late extract addition or brewing. And I make sure that I stir that all in really well. Because the liquid malt extract is so difficult to get out of the containers, something I have started doing is washing and sanitizing a measuring cup, actually dipping it into the beer wort, pouring that hot liquid back into the container, and then giving the container a little bit of a swirl and a shake here. I don't want to put that on too tight. And that helps free up that difficult stuff to get out of the container. And see, that ends up being pretty gosh darn clean here. All right, at this point, I'll dump the wort into the fermentation bucket. At this point, I'll add the wort chiller to the wort, and I'm running cold water through it slowly from my garden hose. Here it is here. And I'm taking that wastewater, which is clean water, and actually putting it into my brewing kettle. And it's going to come out of there warm, and I'll be able to use that for cleaning up the equipment once the process has completed. So what is happening here, cold water is flowing through the garden hose, through the plastic tubing, through the copper tubing. It's actually a heat exchanger, and the cold water going through the copper tubing is going to cool down the beer wort, and then that water is making its way over to the brew kettle, which I can use a little bit later to clean up all the equipment. I'm also going to check on the temperature of the wort. I like to bring it down from the boiling temperature to around 90 degrees before I add any more water to it. So right now it's at about 158, 160 degrees. And so I need to just let it do its thing for a little while. All right, you can see the thermometer now is dropping down to about 90. I say it's dropping because that's at the bottom of the bucket. If I pull it up, the thermometer up, the temperature will rise because heat rises, right? But that's close enough for me right now. Now I'm going to take the wort chiller right out of the fermentation bucket, and I'm going to put it in the brewing kettle. that has some nice warm water in there for cleaning it up. Now I'm going to add some cold water, and there's some graduations on the outside of this bucket that tell you how much water is in there. And what I'm shooting for right now is 4 gallons. So I'm adding cold water, and I'm going to bring the beer wort up to the 4-gallon mark. All right, now that I've got the quantity of beer wort up to 4 gallons, I'm going to drop in my hydrometer and take a little bit of a quick reading, which is pretty high right now. It's about 1.052, which isn't too bad. That's actually pretty good. I also want to take a temperature reading. And right now, the beer wort is reading a temperature of about 80 degrees. So now I'm going to come over here to a neat little website, brewheads.com. There's a hydrometer correction calculator. And if I enter in the reading of 1.052, and then the temperature of, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, I should then hit the calculate gravity, and it comes up to 1.054. It's right there, 1.054. And then if I come over here to the recipe, it says starting gravity should be at 1.052 to 1.057. So at 4 gallons, I'm spot on. I've hit the numbers. I'm not going to add any more water. Now with a specific starting gravity hit, it's time to pitch the yeast. But I want to make sure all contaminants are kept away from the wort. So I'm actually dipping the yeast package into the Star San sanitizing solution. And I'm going to take my scissors and I'll cut that top right off. Now this is the part that's just like making bread. I'm actually sprinkling the yeast in on top of the beer wort. And because this is an ale, the yeast works at the top of the wort, so I'm not mixing it in. I'm just going to leave it there. Now it's time to add the lid to the fermentation bucket. And I like to have the airlock opening on either one side of the bucket or the other, not where the handle is. So I kind of line this up with the handle, and then snap it down for a good tight seal. Now the airlock is actually a 3-part device to let the gases come out of the fermentation bucket but not let air in. And so there is this little cup funnel device that a cap fits into over the center portion, and then a cap fits over that too. To make this work properly, I need to add either some alcohol. A lot of people use vodka halfway up there. I'm going to use a little bit of the Star San that I've already mixed up. So here I've got, you can see a little bit of liquid in there. I've got some Star San in there. And now I'm going to put the centered piece in. Don't really know what all of this is called. I'm just making it up as I go along. And now the cap goes on. And now I'm going to insert the airlock. I'm going to insert the airlock into the airlock hole of the fermentation bucket, and that's just about it. There's one more step. I'm going to move this to a warm place. I'm actually going to wrap a blanket around it and put it in a warm, quiet, kind of dark place. And I have to wait for 2 weeks until the bottling process begins. I'm going to set this bucket right down next to my propane heater, and I'm going to wrap the bucket with this blanket, kind of keep it warm, or at least a stable temperature. It's still fairly cool here for spring in Maine, Mount Desert Island, Maine. So this is where this is going to sit for 1 week. Having a tough time here. And for 1 week, and then at the end of 1 week, I'll transfer the wort to what's called a secondary fermentation bucket, and the wort will continue to ferment for another week, and then at that time I'll transfer it yet to another bucket called the bottling bucket, and that'll be bottling day, and I'll then bottle up all of this beer. I'll wait 2 weeks for carbonation, for the carbonation period in the bottles, and then another 2 weeks for the aging process, and then finally I can put some bottles in the refrigerator and give this brew a try. It's been a lot of fun. It's just kind of cool to come home from a long day of work to find the yeast working away on the sugars inside this fermentation bucket, and you can see the gases being released through the airlock, and that means things are going great.